This is the Marvel Comics we all know and love, full of action, adventure, and plenty of diverse, authentic characters. But did you know that Marvel wasn't always Marvel? I know that sounds weird, but stay with me. It used to be this, and then it was this. And even though Marvel prides itself on being a champion of civil rights, diversity, and equality now, just like its name, it wasn't always that way. Marvel, before it was even Marvel, used to be full of racial stereotypes. Don't believe me? That is Billy Batson, aka Captain Marvel, using blackface. Now that you know how Marvel used to be, the one question in your mind is probably why? Well, it was mostly the social and political atmosphere of the times the comics were being created in. Believe it or not, we can actually observe Marvel's growth from its younger years to the entertainment powerhouse we know and love today by splitting its evolution into several eras. This is Marvel Through the Ages. Timely Comics took off during what's called the Golden Age of Comics, a period in American history during which comic books experienced a surge of popularity, lasting from the late 1930s to the 1950s. In the 1930s and early 40s, the way African American people were portrayed in comic books was terrifying. They typically had huge lips and were usually portrayed as good-natured, clumsy people with service-level jobs. A prime example of this racism is Whitewash Jones. Whitewash was a part of the goofy crime-fighting group the Young Allies, and if his name and how he's drawn isn't enough to convince you that this character is blatantly racist, check this out. Here's our friend Whitewash complaining about not being able to get to fried chicken and watermelon whenever he wants to. If that doesn't make you cringe, I don't know what will. But why were these characters portrayed this way? Well, the blatantly racist minstrel show type characters were popularized in the 1800s, and in the 1930s the character type saw a resurgence in American culture. Even Disney and Looney Tunes hopped on the bandwagon. The most interesting thing to note about African Americans in the Timely era, though, was the fact that they were phased out of the comics at the end of the era, and didn't appear again until the Civil Rights Movement. Another huge part of the Timely era was, of course, the Second World War. Germans were often portrayed as Nazi stooges, with names like Captain von Spitz, and they were portrayed as bumbling and cowardly. Adolf Hitler was even depicted as nothing more than a child throwing a temper tantrum. The most blatant and even violent racism in comics during this time was directed toward the Japanese. There was already plenty of anti-Japanese propaganda everywhere, and Timely was quick to join in, usually pitting Captain America against Japanese villains. Since this started to come up in 1942, we can assume that this is comics reacting with the American people to the Pearl Harbor attacks. Something else to note is, with male partnerships such as Captain America and Bucky constantly being used, some brought up questions about homosexuality. Timely quickly shot this down by introducing more female characters such as Golden Girl. Even though the sexual revolution would start brewing in about a decade, Timely was having none of it. Well, once the Golden Age of Comics came to an end, so did Timely Comics, and that turned into Atlas Comics. Atlas was known for following popular TV and movie trends, and the most popular movies in the US during the 1950s? Western movies. This led to some pretty outrageous depictions of Native Americans in comics. They were commonly drawn red-skinned and spoke broken English. Prize Comics, another comics company, created the character American Eagle, a Native American hero donned in patriotic traditional Native American garb. Marvel would later reimagine this character in the 1980s as Jason Strongbow, a representative of the Navajo tribe. We can't talk about the US in the 1950s without talking about the Red Scare, and once again, lots of propaganda appeared everywhere. Most of the Chinese and Russian characters in comics were portrayed as communist villains, who Captain America would often defeat. Electro, for example, was a communist supervillain from what was the Soviet Union at the time. He was primarily a foe to Captain America, but a new Electro was later reimagined as an enemy of Spider-Man, and he appeared in the most recent Amazing Spider-Man film portrayed by Jamie Foxx. Yellow Claw was a Chinese supervillain from the time period as well, a mastermind who fulfilled the US's 1950s communist fears. He, of course, also appeared in Captain America in the early 1960s. It wasn't until the 1960s that Marvel Comics actually became Marvel Comics. At the dawn of the Marvel era, the civil rights movement was in full swing in America. Marvel began gradually phasing African American characters back into their stories, and created one of its first major black heroes, Black Panther. Racism as a form of violence first appeared in 1966 with the creation of Sons of Serpent, inspired by the KKK. The evil group's entire purpose was to divide America and terrorize all people of color and immigrants living in the nation. They were eventually defeated and exposed by Black Panther and the Avengers. It's clear that Marvel was on board with the civil rights movement, but still marginalized were nationalities associated with communism, namely Vietnam and Cuba. The most infamous Cuban character during this time period is the Crusher, a superhuman whose job was to develop weapons for El Presidente, a communist dictator. The Crusher was ultimately defeated by Iron Man, but Captain America had to take a crack at him too. The 1970s was a time of great social activism and protests against the government due to the Vietnam War. Marvel Comics heroes actually took part in the war directly. One comic even featured Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man fighting in Vietnam. Tony Stark's manufacturing firm was also noted as one of the major weapon suppliers for the US during the war. The 1980s and 1990s saw more characters being introduced to the Marvel Universe without racial stereotypes. Even marginalized communist nationalities were not so harshly depicted. There seemed to be more research done regarding religion, culture, conflicts, and ideas, which made characters more authentic. Many issues in the comics involved drug and gang culture, which was a problem in the US at the time. Marvel also attempted to introduce an openly gay character, Northstar. Alpha Flight No. 7 was the first attempt to reveal that Northstar was gay, but he didn't actually utter the words "I am gay" until Alpha Flight 106. Northstar would later marry his boyfriend Kyle in Astonishing X-Men. We finally come to the last stop in our observation, Marvel from 2000 to today. In the early 2000s, the September 11th attacks had a large impact on Marvel Comics. Captain America became a symbol of hope and strength. Marvel also introduced its first Muslim hero, Soraya Qadir, or Dust, who wears a full burqa. With the ability to transform herself into a sand-like substance, Dust first appeared in New X-Men. Dust was most likely created to combat Islamophobia during the time after 9/11. The Marvel we know today has also taken some steps to diversify itself. Recently, the original Fantastic Four was rebooted, featuring a black Human Torch portrayed by Michael B. Jordan. And despite the original Nick Fury being a white man, he's now being portrayed in the Avengers films by Samuel L. Jackson, contrary to David Hasselhoff's portrayal of Fury in 1998. Idris Elba also made his Marvel appearance in the Thor franchise, starring as Heimdall, a Norse god who guards Thor's home, Asgard. War Machine has also appeared in a few Iron Man films, and Falcon made an appearance in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. The two are said to appear together in the next Avengers film as Avengers themselves. Marvel has other movies lined up for the future, including Black Panther, whose title character will be portrayed by Chadwick Boseman. Marvel's Inhumans is also set to be released, and it's rumored that rap star LL Cool J has a major role in the film. The biggest racial controversy in the Marvel Universe today revolves around the upcoming Netflix series Iron Fist. There's a push for its title hero to be played by an Asian American actor. Since Iron Fist was created during the Kung Fu craze in the 1970s, many say that making the martial artist superhero Asian American will correct decades of cultural appropriation. Rumor has it that Marvel has rejected the idea, but only time will tell who the real Iron Fist will be. Marvel has certainly grown from its humble beginnings to now, and only time will tell what it has in store for us next. A new Marvel era is upon us, and hopefully it's the most interesting one yet.